The year was 1865, and the plains around the Turner homestead lay quiet under a pewter-gray sky, the kind that promised cold before nightfall. Caleb Turner, 12 years old and wiry as a fence post, trudged across the yard with an armload of firewood pressing splinters into his coat. His breath hung in the air, thin and white, drifting away like something trying to escape the land itself. He didn't mind the chill. Out here, the wind was just another neighbor, loud, stubborn, and always pushing. What he minded was the silence. Silence meant winter creeping back, and winter meant remembering things he wished he could forget. He tried not to think about his older brother, Daniel, whose grave lay near the cottonwood tree, with a small wooden cross carved by their father. Caleb focused instead on the simple rhythm of his boots crunching over the hardened soil, the smell of pine still clinging to the chopped logs, and the low groan of the barn door as it shifted in the wind. The day felt ordinary, too ordinary. That kind of quiet usually meant something was about to go wrong. A sharp cough echoed from the tree-line, not an animal sound, but human. Caleb stopped, so suddenly the logs almost slipped from his arms. His heartbeat picked up, quick and hard, like a fist pounding on a door. He slowly lowered the bundle to the ground and listened again. Another cough, weak, ragged. He took a hesitant step forward, then another, until the homestead behind him felt tiny and far away. The tree-line loomed ahead, full of shadows that moved when the wind did, bending branches and tricking the eyes. He'd been warned since childhood not to wander near the woods without his father, but warnings didn't mean much when someone sounded like they were dying. The coughing turned to a faint whimper, too soft to belong to a grown man. Caleb's stomach tightened. Whoever it was, they couldn't wait. The wind shifted, carrying a whisper of something else. Smoke, hunger, fear. Caleb swallowed, pushed past the last patch of dry grass, and stepped beneath the first dark tree. That was when he saw her. A small body lay crumpled at the base of a split cedar trunk, half covered by dirt and dead needles. A girl, maybe 9 or 10, with tangled black hair stiff in the cold and a torn buckskin dress soaked in old blood. Her lips were blue, her eyes half-lidded, and her breath shook like it was deciding whether to keep going. Caleb froze. He had never been this close to a Cheyenne before. Stories told by travelers made them sound like specters, silent, fierce, appearing out of nowhere. But this girl wasn't fierce. She looked like a bird that had fallen from its nest. For a moment, fear held him still. Then her eyelids fluttered, and her gaze found with a silent please so desperate it punched the air from his chest. He knelt beside her, hands trembling as he checked her forehead. She burned with fever despite the winter chill. She tried to lift a hand, but barely managed an inch. Her voice rasped one word he didn't understand, but the meaning, fear, pain, longing, was clear enough. Caleb shrugged off his blanket, his only warm one, worn thin at the edges but still heavy with his own body heat. He wrapped around her shaking frame and whispered, "I got you. You're not dying out here." She was too weak to stand. Caleb pulled her up gently, bracing her head against his shoulder, startled by how light she was. His boots dug into the cold earth as he carried her toward the open field. The wind felt sharper now, chasing them like it meant to tear the warmth from her bones. She coughed again, her whole body wrenching in his arms. Caleb tightened his grip, heart pounding at the thought of what his father would say. He wasn't supposed to bring trouble home. He wasn't supposed to get close to anyone who might bring a tribe down on their land. But the idea of leaving her there, alone, freezing, helpless, felt wrong in a way he couldn't explain. He crossed the yard with new urgency, nearly stumbling as the girl sagged his arms. The cabin door flew open as soon as he reached it. His mother, Sarah Turner, 28 and gentle-eyed despite the hard years, gasped at the sight. "Caleb, what?" "Bring her in, quickly." She stepped aside, pushing the door closed behind them to block the wind. The warmth of the fire washed over them as Caleb lowered the girl onto a soft rug near the hearth. His mother immediately fetched water, blankets, and her small basket of herbs. His father entered with a hunter's stride, tall, broad-shouldered, and cautious by nature. Thomas Turner, 35 and weathered by frontier life, stared at the child with tight lips and narrowed eyes. Where'd she come from? Caleb straightened. Found her by the cedar split. She was dying. Pa. Thomas knelt, studying the wounds with a practiced gaze. These cuts aren't from animals. Someone left her to bleed out. His mother shot him a sharp look. She's a child, Thomas. Whatever happened, we help her. He rubbed his jaw. Her people might think we're the ones who hurt her. Caleb's stomach twisted. He hadn't thought that far ahead. His mother placed a hand on his shoulder. We do what's right, no matter the cost. The girl moaned softly, drawing all their attention. Thomas sighed, frustrated but resigned. Fine, but we keep watch tonight. The fire crackled louder as the storm winds gathered outside. Caleb stayed by the girl's side while his mother cleaned the wounds with warm water and crushed roots. The girl whimpered when the cloth touched her skin, but she clung to Caleb's blanket with weak fingers. Her breathing was shallow, quick, like she was running in her dreams. Caleb didn't know her name, her story, or what horrors had brought her to his trilling, but he felt responsible for her survival in a way that felt older than his years. He pressed her palm gently. You're safe now. I promise. She blinked slowly, as if trying to trust him. Thomas paced near the window, peering into the gathering dark. Tracks near the woods, he muttered. Fresh ones. Didn't look like just one rider. Caleb's breath caught. Are they coming back? His father didn't answer. Outside, the wind carried a faint sound, distant hoofbeats or thunder. It was hard to tell. Thomas gripped his rifle. Either way, we're not taking chances. As dusk thickened, the shadows stretched long across the yard. The girl stirred, whispering something in broken English. Warriors coming. The fear in her voice chilled Caleb deeper than the winter wind. His mother tried to soothe her. It's all right, child. No one here will harm you. But her eyes darted toward the windows with mounting dread. The girl lifted a trembling hand toward the door before collapsing back into the blanket. Caleb looked at his father. Pa, she's scared of him. Why would she be scared of her own tribe? Thomas didn't reply. He simply loaded another round into his rifle. The sky turned from gray to ink, and the world beyond the windows vanished in darkness. Then came the first sign, an orange glow blooming on the ridge. Caleb stepped closer to the window, breath fogging the glass. More lights appeared. Torches. Dozens of them. Then more. The ridge line burned with moving fire. Shapes on horseback emerged like ghosts riding the night. Caleb's heart hammered. Pa, there's so many. Thomas raised a rifle to his shoulder. Get back from the window. But Caleb couldn't move. The sight held him frozen. Hundreds of warriors, silent and still, forming a ring around the homestead. The Turners had seen riders before. Traders, travelers, hunters. But nothing like this quiet army surrounding them with grim patience. The horses snorted clouds of steam, and the torches crackled in the cold air. No war cries. No shouts. Just watching. Waiting. The girl beside the fire stirred again, frightened. Caleb knelt quickly. They're here for you, aren't they? She nodded weakly. His mother whispered to Thomas. If they think we hurt her, they'll burn us out. Thomas finished. Caleb felt a slow dread creep through him, settling heavy in his chest. He had saved her life, but maybe doomed his family in the process. Pa! Caleb managed. What do we do? Thomas exhaled, steady but grim. We stand our ground. We protect our home. Outside, a lone rider moved forward, torchlight flickering across his painted face. A leader, tall, imposing, scarred. He lifted a spear upright in a gesture Caleb didn't recognize. Thomas tightened his grip on the rifle. The rider said nothing, but the message was clear. They wanted a girl. The girl tried to sit up, panic rising fast. She clutched Caleb's sleeve with frail hands. No, no, go, she whispered. Caleb didn't understand everything, but he understood enough. She didn't want to return. Something terrible waited out there for her. Something worse than death on the forest floor. He held her hand tightly. The torches hissed in the wind. The warriors remained motionless. Caleb felt the world shrink to the small cabin, the weak firelight, and the girl who might change everything. He looked at his father, at the armed shadow of a man preparing for a night none of them might survive. Outside, the riders' silhouettes flickered like restless spirits, and more torches sparked along the ridge. The circle tightened. Caleb whispered to himself, unsure if it was prayer or promise. I won't let you die. Not alone. Not scared. The night thickened. The riders watched. The girl trembled. And as Caleb knelt beside the fire, holding her hand, he finally understood just how dangerous kindness could be on the frontier. The first drumbeat echoed across the plains. The warriors had come. The wind shifted as noon rode in, carrying the faint sour smell of burned mesquite. Eli Carson felt it before he heard it. The way a man feels the tremor of a coming storm long before clouds gather. He reined in atop the ridge, his coat tugged by the dry breeze, and stared across the wide basin where the girl had vanished hours earlier. He'd tracked her small footprints as far as this rise, but here the trail fanned into chaos. Hoof marks, heel drags, the prints of men moving fast. He cursed softly under his breath. Mara, 14, stubborn, wild-eyed, more grit than sense. She'd run from his cabin at dawn, convinced the raiders who'd taken her family were still near. He'd promised her he'd help. Sworn it even, yet she had slipped out before first light with nothing but a blanket and a borrowed pistol she barely knew how to hold. Eli scanned the far line where dust rose in a thin column. Smoke curled above it, faint but undeniable. Somewhere out there, someone had set fire to something small, brush, wagon wood, maybe to signal others. His jaw stiffened. That wasn't Mara's doing. That was men, full-grown, hungry for trouble. He nudged his horse downhill, boots tapping lightly. A shadow moved along the far slope. A rider. No. 3 riders, angled in a loose spread, watching the valley like hawks. Eli slid his gaze past them, searching for any hint of girl. Nothing. Only those riders and the slow creep of smoke. He guided the babe behind a shale outcrop and crouched low. His bones protested. He wasn't young anymore, not since the border wars and the wound in his left leg that still stiffened when nights turned cold. But Mara didn't understand things like time or pain. She understood loss. The same loss Eli carried every day without speaking of it. He forced himself upright and scanned again. The riders weren't raiders. Their coats were too clean, their saddles too fine. Bounty men, perhaps, or ranch guards. Either way, they were circling something, and he wouldn't know until he got close. A faint sound drifted on the wind, a cry, thin as wind chime wire. Eli snapped to attention. It came from the gulch north of the riders. He mounted swiftly and moved along the rocky edge, keeping low. The path wound toward a narrow cut where cottonwoods clung stubbornly to hard soil. As he approached, he saw movement, someone scrambling behind a fallen trunk. He slid off his horse and eased forward. Mara, he whispered. A face appeared, her face, dust-smeared, eyes bright as coals and twice as hot. She stepped out clutching a revolver far too large for her small hands. They found the wagon, she gasped. The riders, they were digging through it. Eli reached for the gun, but she jerked it back. They're not the ones who took Ma, but they're looking for someone. They kept saying a man was close. His suspicion sharpened. Did they see you? She swallowed hard. Her silence answered. Eli raked a hand through his hair. The girl wasn't just a stray, frightened kid anymore. She was a beacon, and the wrong eyes had already found her. He peered toward the smoke column again. It had grown darker. We need to move, he said. If they saw you, they'll track you. And if they're hunting someone else, you don't want to be caught in their way. Mara's chin quivered, but she nodded. Her youth showed only in that quiver. Everything else in her was hardened by sorrow. He helped her onto the bay and led the horse through the cottonwoods, keeping the shadows. But as they emerged onto the rocky flats, a rifle shot tore the air. Eli grabbed Mara, shoving her down. The bullet struck the boulder behind them, ripping stone. The riders had spotted them. Eli fired once, an answer more than a threat, and pulled Mara along the ravine wall. They sprinted, slipping, stumbling, breathing dust. Above, the riders swung around, tightening their arc. Mara tugged his sleeve. They shouted something, she said breathlessly. About a price on your head. Eli stopped dead. A price on his head. So it had begun. They reached an abandoned line shack tucked beneath Bluff's car by centuries of wind. Eli pushed Mara inside and dropped the bar across the door. The shack smelled of old leather and mouse droppings, but offered cover. Mara leaned against the table, panting. Why would they want you? You've never done nothing wrong. Eli knelt by the wall and touched a shallow groove burned into the wood, an old mark, carved by soldiers or scouts long before the shack was deserted. He didn't answer until he'd checked the windows. I reckon that depends on who's telling the story, he said finally. Mara frowned. Tell me your story. He sighed. There was a man down in Rio Largo, a cattle lord with a temper like kerosene. He accused me of stealing stock. I didn't, but a few of his men were killed in a skirmish afterward, by Apaches, not by me. Didn't matter. Someone decided to blame me. Said I led an ambush. Mara stared in disbelief. So they put a bounty on you? A high one. Eli tightened his belt. High enough that any saddle tramp or hired killer will chase it from here to Mexico. The girl covered her mouth. Then those men will keep coming. They won't stop. No, he said. They won't. A hoofbeat cracked the silence. Then another. The riders had found the trail to the shack. Eli lifted the revolver Mara still clutched. I'll take that now. She surrendered it reluctantly. He checked the cylinder, then motioned her toward the back wall where a gap in the boards offered an escape. Listen, he said. When I say run, you run. Find high ground. Don't stop. I'm not leaving you. You will if you want to see your ma again. Thunder rolled as a boot struck the front door. Wood splintered. Mara shrank back. The riders' voices sounded through the cracks. 3 men, confident, armed. Eli braced himself. Run, he whispered. He shoved the back panel aside, and Mara slipped out. Eli waited only long enough to hear her feet crunch on gravel. Then he turned as the front door burst inward. The first man stepped through, rifle raised. Eli fired once. The man dropped before he finished cursing. The second man lunged in, swinging wide, and Eli ducked behind the table, firing again. The shot grazed the man's shoulder, sending him stumbling. The third man pushed forward, face cold as hammered iron. He leveled his pistol. Carson, he spat. You're worth more alive, but I ain't picky. Eli hurled the table at him and dove through the back opening. Bullets whined past. He hit ground hard but rolled, scrambling after Mara's fading footsteps. The bluffs rose like jagged teeth, and he followed their shadow. He caught up to Mara near the rocks. She was shaking. They're coming, she whispered. Not if we lose them, he said. Come on. They climbed a narrow path between 2 limestone walls, squeezing through crevices and ducking loose stone. The riders' curses echoed below, but the path twisted so sharply that horses couldn't follow. At the top, the land opened into a hidden plateau dotted with juniper and shale. A trickle of water wound through its center. Eli led Mara to a fallen tree and knelt. You did good, he said. You stayed ahead of them. She looked up at him, uncertain. What happens now? Eli didn't answer right away. The plateau gave them time, not safety. He peered down at the valley and saw the riders regrouping, circling like wolves deprived of meat. They'll track us again, he said, soon as they find the upper trail. Mara hugged her knees. Why'd you help me? Back at the cabin. You didn't have to. He stared at the distant horizon. Because once, long ago, someone helped me when they didn't have to, and I failed to help someone else soon after. I won't make the same mistake twice. Mara absorbed that silently. Below, the sun dipped, cooling the land. The riders turned south toward the waterline. Eli's breath eased. They were taking a long path, meaning he had time to prepare. We move at dusk, he said. There's an old mining road east of here. If we reach it, we might outpace them. Where does it lead? To the one man who can clear my name, he said, and maybe find your ma. Her eyes widened. Hope sparked like a struck match. But hope, Eli knew, was a fragile thing. Too fragile for what waited in the dark. Dusk settled cold across the plateau. Stars pricked the sky one by one, sharp against the indigo stretch. Eli and Mara moved quietly, following a narrow game trail that twisted between boulders. The mining road lay somewhere ahead, abandoned years ago after silver veins dried. Mara clutched her blanket tighter. "Do you think my ma's still alive?" Eli kept his pace steady. "If the raiders wanted horses or supplies, they'd keep their captives. They don't waste people unless they have to. That doesn't make me feel better." "I know," he said softly. They crested a rise where the ground dipped into a natural wash. A faint glow flickered near the bend, firelight. Eli froze and motioned Mara down. Voices drifted up. 3 men again. Not the riders. They dressed rougher, spoke harsher. Drifters. Worse than the bounty hunters. Because they wanted whatever they could take. Eli drew his revolver. 1 bullet left. He cursed silently. Mara whispered, "We can go around." "Too open," he whispered back. "They'd see us." The drifters laughed below, passing a bottle. Eli scanned for anything. Rocks, branches, shadows deep enough to hide movement. Then Mara tugged his sleeve. "I can distract them," she said. "I'm small. Fast." "Absolutely not." "You helped me. Let me help you." He stared at her, a child who'd lost everything but still offered what little she had. A lump rose in his throat. "No," he said firmly. "But you can do something. When I move, you run to the far ledge and don't stop until you reach the road. Understand?" She nodded reluctantly. He counted breaths. 1, 2, 3. Then he threw a stone far across the wash. It clattered loudly. The drifters stood, turning toward the sound. Eli and Mara moved. They slipped down the slope, hugging shadows. The drifters, distracted, drifted toward the noise. Eli ushered Mara along the wash wall, climbing toward the ledge. But as they reached the top, a voice barked, "Hold it." A drifter stood above them, rifle raised. Eli pushed Mara behind him. The man's grin showed broken teeth. "Got ourselves a stray and his pup." Eli lifted his revolver, even though it held only 1 shot. "You got 1 chance," the man sneered. "Drop it." Eli fired. The recoil snapped his wrist. The man fell backward, tumbling down the rocks. The rifle clattered beside him. Eli grabbed it, hauled Mara to her feet, and sprinted. They broke onto the mining road, faint, dusty, but real. Mara gasped, "We made it." Then a new sound rolled across the dark. Hooves. The bounty riders had circled back. Eli shoved Mara behind an outcrop. "Stay low." The riders thundered up the road, silhouettes sharp against the rising moon. Eli raised the rifle. His hands trembled. He'd used his last bullet in the revolver. He needed these shots to count. The lead rider aimed at him. A crack split the air, but not Eli's. The rider jolted backward, falling from his saddle. Another shot rang out. The second rider cursed and veered. Eli ducked, scanning the darkness. A figure stepped from the far ridge, rifle smoking. A woman's voice called, steady and fierce, "Eli Carson, I told you trouble would find you before sunrise." Eli blinked. "Clara?" Mara stared. "Who is she?" "A friend." Eli said with a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The last person they'd expect. Clara Hartwell, 38, sharp-eyed, tall as any ranch hand, strode down the slope with confidence born of hard miles and harder truths. She slid another round into her carbine. "Your mess gets bigger every year, Carson," she said. "Good thing I heard talk of bounty men headed this way." Eli exhaled. Relief washed over him like rain. Clara glanced at Mara. "And who's your shadow?" Mara straightened. "Mara, 14. Clara nodded. Good age for trouble. Eli lowered the rifle. "Can you help us reach Juniper Crossing?" Clara grinned. "I can do better. I can get you there before dawn." Mara's hope returned. Eli felt something he hadn't felt in years, certainty. As Clara led them down the night road, Eli glanced once at the stars above, feeling the weight of the hunt behind him and the faint promise ahead. For the first time since the fire on the horizon, he believed they might outrun the darkness. The first chill of morning crept across the high plains, and the horizon bled gray as dawn threatened through the heavy cloud. Eli Carson's boots crunched the frozen dirt of the mining road. Every step measured, every muscle coiled with readiness. Mara, 14 and still small for her age, trailed a step behind, clutching her blanket, her dark hair caught in the wind. She had grown quieter during the night's trek, her eyes wide and scanning every shadow, every tree line, every whisper of movement. Fear had sharpened her senses, but had also given her a stillness that bordered on uncanny for someone so young. Eli's eyes, gray like the winter sky above, darted along the road. Every ridge, every boulder seemed a potential hiding place for bounty hunters or worse. He adjusted his coat, tugging it close to block the cold, and lifted the old rifle that had saved him countless times. The metal was worn smooth from years of handling, and he knew every recoil, every bite of powder by memory. Clara Hartwell, 38, followed a few paces above the rise on the ridge, carbine ready, her posture like a hawk on watch. The woman's sun-bleached hair was tied back tightly, revealing a face carved by hard miles and harder choices. Her green eyes swept the plains, noting threats before they had a chance to breathe. The road narrowed where it twisted around a rocky bluff, forcing Eli and Mara to move single file. He motioned for her to crouch, pressing low against the edge where the rock face jutted out. Mara obeyed, shivering as much from adrenaline as cold. The distant rumble of hooves echoed faintly across the plains. Bounty riders were closing in. Eli's jaw tightened. Every plan they had depended on the narrow path ahead. One wrong move and they would be trapped, cut off from the plateau that offered their only escape. Clara's voice floated down, calm but firm. "They're testing your patience, Carson. Wait for my signal. Don't waste shots." Eli nodded. He could see the lead rider now, silhouetted against the dawn, scanning the road with rifle level low. Another followed closely, eager, confident, thinking the prey they sought was unaware. Eli's stomach tightened. He had faced men like these before, but never with a child at his side. Mara's hand brushed the sleeve. He glanced down. Her wide eyes held fear tempered with trust. He could not fail her. The ridge above shifted, and Clara's carbine barked once. The lead rider jerked violently, spitting dirt. The others hesitated. That pause, a fraction of a second, was enough. Eli pulled Mara behind a boulder and leveled his rifle. He fired carefully, one shot, precise. The nearest rider stumbled, then fell, horse skidding in the loose dirt. Mara gasped softly, her hand gripping the blanket tighter. "Run now," Eli hissed. He grabbed her and sprinted along the bluff's edge, keeping low. Clara provided covering fire, her aim impeccable. The remaining riders tried to regroup, shouting commands and cursing, but the landscape favored Eli. Every ridge, every shadow, every twisted juniper was a tool in his hands. They were no longer fleeing blindly. They were moving as predators, silent and deliberate. The road curved sharply, forcing the remaining riders into a single file, easier targets. Eli fired once more, forcing another man from his saddle. Mara stumbled, but he caught her, her small frame pressed against him, heart hammering. I can't do this," she whispered. Eli shook his head. "You can. You're stronger than you know." Her eyes met his briefly, and in them he saw a flicker of courage, raw and unpolished, but enough to carry them forward. The plateau opened ahead, a sweeping expanse dotted with boulders and sparse juniper. It would provide cover and a vantage point. Clara called down from above. "Almost there. Keep moving." Eli adjusted Mara's pace, keeping her behind the largest rocks. The riders below cursed, firing sporadically, but each shot kicked up dust too late to matter. The wind carried their voices, but not their aim. Eli's lungs burned, his legs ached, but he pressed forward. Mara stumbled once more. He steadied her, looking into her eyes. One more stretch. Then we're safe. Behind them, the last of the riders turned, realizing the futility. One halted on the plain, brow furrowed, watching them vanish behind rocks. His companions were down, and in that moment, Eli felt the rush of victory, sharp, immediate, but hollow, tempered by the knowledge that the threat was far from over. Mara leaned against a boulder, gasping, but the fire in her eyes had not dimmed. She had survived, and with her, so had hope. The sun rose fully now, spilling light across the plateau in harsh white clarity. Eli, Mara, and Clara crouched behind rocks, surveying the open plains below. The mining road stretched behind them, empty except for the scattered dust of retreating riders. Yet every mile of open ground was dangerous, and they had to move. Mara's legs shook from the exertion, and she clutched the blanket around her shoulders as if it were armor. Eli checked the rifle again, counting rounds. Only a few left. Clara moved silently, scanning the horizon, carbine raised. "They'll circle back," she warned. "Bounty hunters never quit. And these men are professional. They'll come with more riders." Eli nodded, jaw tight. His mind raced, weighing options, calculating the terrain, timing, and probable paths. Mara watched him, sensing the weight of responsibility pressing against him like stone. A distant horn sounded. Not a hunting call, something sharper, more deliberate. Eli froze. Clara's eyes narrowed. They're signaling someone. Moments later, dust rose in the distance. More riders, dozens of them, approaching from a hidden gully. Eli's heart sank. They were outnumbered, outgunned, yet retreat wasn't an option. The plateau offered the high ground, and high ground meant leverage. He positioned Mara behind the largest boulder. Clara slid into place beside him, her posture calm but tense. "Listen," Eli said, voice low but steady. "We hold them here, long enough for Mara to reach the canyon path and safety. Understand?" She nodded silently. He kissed the top of her head briefly, a gesture of reassurance, a fatherly promise in the middle of chaos. The first wave of riders crested the ridge, horns raised, rifles ready. Eli fired one shot, and a man tumbled from his horse. Clara followed with precise bursts, forcing the remaining men to slow. The sound of hooves striking stone and earth filled the air, mingling with shouts and the rattle of rifles. Mara's small form trembled, but she did not cry. She clutched the blanket, eyes wide, observing every movement. She understood now that courage was not absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. The riders tried to flank, but the jagged rocks forced a bottleneck. Eli and Clara moved fluidly, trading positions, guiding Mara's gaze, keeping her from panic. A rider broke formation and charged directly toward them. Eli waited. Shot fired. Rider gone. Another moved in. Clara's carbine roared, echoing across the plateau. Dust, smoke, and the metallic tang of gunfire swirled. Mara's stomach churned, yet she stayed pressed low, moving as Eli guided her. Hours could have passed, though the world seemed suspended in a moment of frantic motion and calculated stillness. Finally, the last rider faltered, recognizing that the plateau was a death trap for anyone but the most reckless. They circled, considered, then broke off, retreating down the far slope. Eli lowered his rifle slowly. Mara let out a shuddering breath. They're gone. For now, Eli said, but we move. Now. No rest until Juniper Crossing. Clara clapped him lightly on the shoulder. You did good. They'll remember this plateau for a long time, though. Eli helped Mara to her feet. Her small frame leaned heavily on him, but she stood proud in her survival, eyes bright, hair matted with sweat and dust, face streaked with dried tears. Clara moved ahead, scanning the road, leading the way with confidence. As they approached the canyon path, Eli paused for a final look back. The plateau, scarred with spent shots and dusted with the morning frost, seemed empty and silent now, yet every rock and shadow bore witness to what had happened. He knew this was more than survival. It was a declaration. He had defended a child, protected a life, and faced overwhelming odds without surrendering. Mara's hand found his, and he squeezed it lightly, a silent affirmation that courage, even in youth, could alter the course of the world. The canyon stretched ahead, narrow but navigable. Eli led them carefully, Clara covering the rear. The sun climbed, illuminating the way, and for the first time in days, the world felt larger than the threat surrounding them. Mara's voice, soft but firm, broke the silence. Thank you, she said. Eli's gaze softened. You're welcome. But remember, kid, courage like yours doesn't belong to one day. It belongs to every choice you make after. They moved forward into the canyon, a fragile band of survivors bound by trust, fear, and determination. Behind them, The dust settled on the plateau, leaving the echoes of the confrontation like a ghost. Ahead lay safety, and perhaps the chance to reclaim what had been lost. The prairie stretched onward, endless, unforgiving, yet offering the faintest glimmer of hope. And in that hope, they would continue, step by step, through the wild, toward whatever dawn awaited.